We've all seen how there's tons of analog versus digital videos out there where people are debating which sounds better. And I've never taken much interest in any of that because I've felt like people are completely missing the point on why analog is better. And it has nothing to do with the sound. But it's something that took me years to understand. Now, I started recording on tape around 1978, working my way through multiple multi-track formats until I bought this Tascam 1-inch 16-track reel-to-reel in 1988 for my studio, The Zone. I used it almost continuously for 12 years. And I worked on 2-inch 24-track machines at other studios all through the 1990s. But there were so many things that frustrated me about analog. Yes, I know that recording a hot level of tape and getting that tape compression is cool, and of course, analog smooths out those quick initial transients that are at the beginning of percussive sounds. But still, there was so much to hate about analog. It's noisy. Yeah, you could use Dolby or DBX noise reduction, but that made it sound like there was a veil over the sound. And no matter what kind of tape machine I was using, after I'd recorded something, it would sound different than the way it sounded when I'd mic'd everything up. And that was the sound I wanted. So I'd have to counteract by EQing, usually boosting some treble or mid-range, but it was always a guessing game. And each time you ran or recorded a new track, a teeny bit of high-end would get erased from the tape. So if you're working on an album for months, by the time you got to mix down, it sounded worse. Also, tape was expensive. I was spending $70 to $80 a reel, which after recording alignment tones would leave me about 15 minutes of recording time, which meant recording an album was a lot of money for a lot of reels of tape. So when you could record and mix professionally completely in a computer, I was all in. More tracks, instantly recallable mixes, non-destructive editing. I was so early into the game that I was among the first to record and mix Billboard charting hits totally in the box. And I stayed there for years. It was a new frontier of technology and efficiency. But over time, I felt like something was missing and that we were all being driven to this rush assembly line production. I just wanted to get back to something that was creative and unique, which is one of the reasons I started this YouTube channel. But then two things happened. I went and got my 1-inch 16-track reel-to-reel from my other studio, The Zone, where it'd been in storage for almost 25 years. And I made a couple short videos about it as a curiosity from my past. And then I figured I'd stick it in the corner and my clients could look at it and go, cool. But those videos blew up, which caused me to make more videos, which caused me to dig through my old recordings and reevaluate the past. And I started live streaming some of my recording sessions, which awakened something inside of me. The energy of having an audience and creating music in the moment. You see, I got into music to be a performing recording artist. I hadn't thought about being a producer or mixer except for my own music. I was having a blast, and I realized that everything I created during the live streams was way better than the things I'd been creating using the kind of workflows we've fallen into over the last 10 or 20 years. And all of that stuff got me thinking about commitment. See, nowadays, if you stake 'em a take, Nowadays, if you make a mistake, you just hit undo. But back then, there was no undo. You see, when you would punch in a vocal or anything, it meant that it was going to erase what was previously there. Now, you could always record your fixes to another track, but since most of us were working on 8, 16-track, maybe 24-track, you were going to run out of tracks. You weren't likely to do that. You could record your fixes to another track and bounce them back to the original track, but that would add another layer of noise to the tape, so you were less likely to do that as well. All this meant that you needed to know what you were going to do, and you needed to have your together. But nowadays, we have unlimited undos. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my undos, but I found myself sometimes recording a part so many times that by the time I get it right, it has lost all its soul and energy. And after that, I'm going back and listening to all these different takes, and I'm putting off making a visceral decision versus a clinical decision, which just takes you away from the gut of the moment and takes time and energy away from getting to the rest of the song, which just starts to affect everything else. But working in analog forces you to take your art more seriously as a skill or a craft or a commitment. Because when you went to the studio, there was a lot at stake. It was kind of like going to a wedding or an important meeting or going on stage because recording was a performance. Another reason why analog is better has to do with longevity. This is the first computer I recorded and mixed on in the studio. I moved on to a standalone Akai 16-track recorder, but after that, it was just a series of new computers, new operating systems, interfaces. It averages out to about one new computer and all the crap that goes along with that every 3 years or so. And there's been the unending and expensive cable upgrades. Some of these SCSI cables cost me $90 each. I've got boxes of all the different types of cables we use to hook up our interfaces to the computers. And there's the whole computer monitor connector evolution. I've got more USB cables than I've got missing socks. We started on floppy drives and moved through a series of very expensive SCSI drives. My first 1 gigabyte hard drive cost $1,000. And because of that, we backed up onto DVDs every day. I've probably got thousands of these. Later on, we moved to AIT, digital tape backup systems, and their proprietary tape drives. But before long, hard drives became a lot cheaper, so we started backing up onto those. But then they would upgrade the connectors, which meant we had to upgrade our cables, which meant we had to upgrade our computers. A lot of the enclosures would fail, so we started swapping out drives. But many drives died, and now all of this stuff is obsolete. And some of this music will never be recovered. There was no longevity. On the other hand, my 16-track reel-to-reel, which still runs, all the connectors are the same connectors we use today, standard XLR connectors. And my TIAC 3340S 4-track reel-to-reel recorder, which I bought used for $800 when I was 15 years old in 1978, it uses standard RCA connectors. Now, these were not considered by any means the best tape recorders for the time. However, they are robust machines designed to last a lifetime. This thing has been sitting on a shelf at my other studio, The Zone, for almost 30 years, and I brought it up here, I guess a year or so ago, and plugged it in, and it turned on. And I grabbed all these old tapes. I've listened to most of these. These are mostly from the late 70s and 80s. There's a few here I'm not sure if I've gone through. I think it's this one I've not played yet. It's from high school. It's probably 1980, 1981. Oh, and I did not store these tails out back then. I didn't know what that was at the time. So if anybody's wondering why I'm doing it this way, I didn't know about fast-forwarding your tapes when you were done and storing them tails out. There are a couple songs in here. I kind of know what they are. I don't know if I'll listen to them. There's one in particular I'm interested in. Let's see. I think this is it. This is me, my friend Drew Allen, and our buddy Harry Joyner jamming in my parents' basement. This is... This recording is 42 years old. I maybe listened to this 32 years ago, maybe at the latest. This tape is running incredibly smoothly. As I was fast-forwarding it out here, it was completely smooth. There's no stickiness coming off. Some tapes do get sticky. The Ampex tape that I have that I actually use for most of my career, it'll get sticky and it starts to degrade. But if you bake it, there's a process called baking, and I actually made a video about that. It'll bind the tape together so you have a couple weeks and you can transfer it into the computer. But seriously, 42 years. I can retrieve this stuff. I can play it back. There's nothing wrong with this tape right here. Try that with a computer and a hard drive. Of course, I guess it's kind of ironic that I'm recording it into the computer to back it up. Silly, huh? But to me, the thing that made recording in analog so much better came down to process, how we recorded each day. And these two things that we would do over and over again that I don't think people really think much about, but had a huge impact on our state of minds. And that would be rewinding and changing reels of tape. You see, nowadays, if you got to go back and re-record something or do a punch-in and just repair one section, there's no rewind time, so you can hit stop,
Let's do another take.
and instantly be right back to where you were before and start recording again.
Yeah, I think you can punch it out. Here we go.
And do it again.
Yeah, that was great. Give me another.
And do it again.
Ooh, I like that one. Give me one more.
And again.
Here we go.
And do it again. But when you were working on analog tape, rewinding back to the beginning of a verse took a little bit longer. And if you were going back to the beginning of the song, there was enough time to catch your breath, get a drink of water, collect your thoughts. And if you needed to jump to another song, you'd have to wind the whole reel off the machine, clean the heads, which you needed to do in between every reel, and then load a whole other reel on. All this took some time. Today, we don't stop. But this nonstop workflow hasn't actually added anything to the quality of my work, and it's contributed to a lack of perspective, which just leads to creative dead ends and a lot of wasted time. So years ago, I started taking lots of teeny breaks throughout the day, and I found that by just stepping away for a few minutes or walking out of the room or going outside, not long enough to get out of the vibe, but just long enough to reset my ears, would make everything clearer when I hit the space bar again. And now that I think about it, maybe I've been trying to recreate the time that we would need to rewind and change reels. I mean, it doesn't matter how fast or efficient you are with your work, and, you know, if you lose perspective why we're doing this, I mean, it is art. It won't matter. The process does have a huge effect on the outcome of your work. So what is the real reason why analog is better? Well, obviously, it's not about the sound for me, because I'm going to find a good way to get the sound. It's really about the workflow and the commitment to a quality performance. It's also about having that creative space, just a little extra time to think, which is huge. But it's also about the machines and the infrastructure. Analog is a reliable and strong system. They still work. You don't have to keep replacing parts over and over again. But if you think about your computers and your operating systems and the software, how much money have you put into that? How many times does it have to be redone? And how many times does it go bad? It's just actually not that reliable. And I feel like we're building a house of cards, and not just for the music industry, but our whole society. I'm not sure we're necessarily headed down the right path in so many ways. But me, I'm just going to keep creating my music, and I hope you will too. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and be unique.